7. Imperial German High Seas Fleet. The Orkney Islands are home to a wind-sheltered natural harbour known as Scapa Flow. Throughout both World Wars, the Royal Navy utilised the port as a naval station. Germany was ordered to hand over all of her warships in November 1918, just a few days after the armistice. The German Imperial Navy arrived at Scapa Flow with a fleet of about 250 ships, including 74 battleships. All German vessels had to be turned over to the Allies in accordance with the Treaty of Versailles provisions. In order to prevent World War I enemies like the British and the French from seizing control of the fleet, Vice Admiral Ludwig von Reuter made the decision to scuttle the Armada in June 1919. And within hours, just about every one of the 74 German ships was intentionally submerged beneath the waves. It was crucial to get rid of the wrecks that immediately threatened passage because of the Royal Navy's strategic importance of their Scapa Flow base. The rights to utilize the wrecks were purchased by the business Cox and Danks, which then began the salvage effort. Despite several failures, the business was able to raise and salvage 32 ships, thanks to their advanced methods. In 1936, a different business took over, and several other ships were rescued over time. 7 boats, measuring between 492 and 591 feet, are still submerged and will remain in their final resting place at Scapa Flow for good. 6. Native American Burial Ground. Officials from the state of Florida announced on February 28, 2018, that a 7,000-year-old Native American burial site had been uncovered off the coast of Venice in the Gulf of Mexico. When it was first built, it wasn't at the bottom of the sea, prior to the Florida shoreline shifting as sea levels rose thousands of years ago. The nearshore burial site was an inland freshwater pond with a floor composed of peat. Since its discovery, officials have emphasized that they're working hard to maintain the site. Divers and other interested parties are forbidden from disrupting the burial ground out of respect for the prehistoric people buried there and their current descendants. Excavation and/or removal of any materials or human remains from the site is also prohibited under Florida law, since the area is protected. According to a statement released by the Florida Department of State's Bureau of Archaeological Research, divers initially uncovered possible human bone fragments at the location in June 2016 and submitted the discovery to state archaeologists for further investigation. The pond's peat-lined bottom, which remained intact long after it was submerged by the Gulf of Mexico, is where archaeologists think the ancestors of native Floridians interred their dead. Peat has a tendency to retain biological matter, including human remains. The so-called bog bodies have been found in ancient peat bogs all across the world, and at times have been found impressively preserved, even after thousands of years. 5. Fossilized shark teeth. In the Indian Ocean, a graveyard containing hundreds of shark teeth is hidden about 3.5 miles below the surface. On board the RV Investigator, a research vessel that measures 308 feet long, the discovery was made in October during a month-long expedition that was carried out along the southern tip of Indonesia. And the whole project was run by Australia's national science organisation called the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, CSIRO. In an effort to gather fish as part of an ongoing biodiversity assessment, the researchers dropped a trawling net into the deep water on the last day of the expedition after 26 previous attempts. But instead, they dredged up hundreds of shark teeth, enough to fill an entire net. At first, the researchers were a little upset because the net was filled with mud, so they assumed they didn't collect many fish specimens. However, they dug through the mud anyway and were thankful that they did. They discovered fossilized teeth from ancient sharks, including the direct ancestor of the enormous megalodon shark, in addition to teeth from current mako and great white sharks. Researchers gathered more than 750 teeth in total, which ranged in sizes from 0.39 inches to 4 inches, the latter being identified as belonging to a megalodon progenitor. As a result of the teeth spending so much time on the ocean floor, the researchers saw deposits of black manganese nodules developing on several of the teeth. But in every other respect, the teeth were all healthy. Since they don't believe that many sharks died there, researchers are unsure of why such a large number of teeth gathered in this area of the ocean. Sharks have an endless amount of teeth that are replaced like a production line, in contrast to humans, who only have one set of baby teeth at birth and one set of adult teeth throughout their lives. Ancient sharks most likely lived in a group where the teeth were located, which were discovered on a deep sea plain. According to experts, a shark colony formerly swam in and around this site, which was once a component of an old reef covered with seamounts. According to experts, it's possible that they lost their worn-out teeth as they swam, which would explain why so many of them were found in the same place. 4. H.L. Hunley. The H.L. Hunley was a Confederate submarine with an 8-person crew that was constructed out of 40 feet of bulletproof iron. But despite its reputation, it was a hazardous vessel to inhabit. However, it made history when it became the first submarine ever to sink an enemy vessel. Hunley sank 3 times in barely 8 months of service during the Civil War, from July 1863 to February 1864, killing roughly 30 men, including its creator, Horace Lawson Hunley. It was located twice, but marine and military historians have long been perplexed by the ship's final sinking, which occurred immediately after it fired a live torpedo into the USS Housatonic, a Union cruiser. Amazingly though, over 130 years after it went down, Hunley was discovered on the ocean floor in 1995. It was brought back to life 5 years later. All 8 crew members were unsettlingly seated at their respective workstations within the submarine, gathered around a massive hand crank that ran along its center. Numerous explanations have been proposed in order to try and understand why the ship sank and why the crew members didn't attempt to escape. Additional information has been found by researchers. The crew of the Hunley should have been able to leave the ship with the aid of a concealed fail-safe device in the keel, but it was never used. This implies that whatever sank the sub may not have been spotted by the crew. Michael Scafuri has spent 18 years conducting research on the sub. His team of experts discovered that the emergency levers were all locked in place after removing layers of corrosion, silt, and shells from the vessel, more proof that there wasn't much fear on board. The levers would have lifted the submarine to the surface and allowed the crew to swim to safety by releasing 1,000 pounds of so-called keel blocks. This find paved the way for 2 new theories. Either the crew was unaware that they were in danger, or they didn't anticipate the need to surface immediately. The Hunley was also tiny, so small that the soldiers weren't able to stand up with their backs straight. But regardless of its size, the crew still made no attempt to get away. That's why Duke University researchers speculated that they likely died rather quickly, quite possibly from the explosion of the submarine's own spar torpedo. According to doctoral student Rachel Lance, the pressure wave from the explosion was transported inside the submarine. She added that the explosion was big enough to kill the entire crew. In their 2017 research, experts built a scale replica of the submarine and detonated it in a pond. They were able to confirm a long-held theory by measuring the forces. Regardless of these developments, Scafuri has said it would still be some time before they could say with certainty what had taken place within the Hunley. He explained that he definitely wanted to get to that point, but he didn't guarantee it would be achievable. For the time being, scientists are concentrating on excavation, eliminating additional corrosion and underwater debris that have accumulated over the decades it sat on the ocean floor. If you were given the opportunity, would you join a diving team that works to excavate sunken ships? Let us know in the comments. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. 3. Deep Sea Desolation. Before a mechanical issue caused James Cameron to surface during his 2012 dive to the Challenger Deep, he made as many observations as he could. He shocked himself by realizing that he was basically alone down there. With the exception of the occasional inch-long prawn, he was the first person to ever see with his own eyes a depth of 35,576 feet beneath the ocean surface using a specially made submarine. There were no terrifying marine creatures, evolutionary miracles, or stunningly abrasive examples of nature's most basic beauty. James was the only one in his small metal ball, and him and the machine were alone in an underwater ghost town. The deepest part of the water, according to the man, is lunar, desolate and isolated, and he experienced total separation from all of mankind during the dive. Unfortunately, he was unable to collect samples since he had to cut his trip short due to mechanical issues. James Cameron, who still claimed that his effort was a major success, says that the Mariana Trench, which is bigger than the Grand Canyon and as deep as Mount Everest, will be explored over the course of several expeditions. 2. Nazi Silva. A British-led crew has reached a record-breaking depth of 17,000 feet to retrieve a trove of silver coins worth $40 million. And apparently, they were originally on board a steamship that was sank by the Nazis. When a U-boat attacked the SS City of Cairo in 1942, when it was sailing from Bombay to London, it lost 100 tons of coins roughly 480 miles south of St. Helena. Given the difficulties salvage professionals faced, it was long believed that the cargo of the ship, which belonged to the UK Treasury, would be lost forever. But then, the UK Ministry of Transport hired the underwater company called Deep Ocean Search, DOS, comprised of 20 French oceanographers, to collect the coins from an extremely deep part of the ocean. The search submarine made a successful recovery on its first dive, according to Mava Onda, one of the oceanographers working on board the rescue vessel named S.V. John Lethbridge. When the robot produced coins bearing the royal stamp, the discovery was verified. The depths required to collect the majority of the trove, however, caused severe difficulties for the crew. A representative for DOS stated that the crew rapidly realized that working at this depth produced major technological challenges that had to be handled swiftly. And even though the recovery happened back in 2013, it wasn't made public until 2015. 1. Moon rocket engines. In 2012, Jeff Bezos, the creator and millionaire mogul who created Amazon.com, said on his Bezos Expeditions Venture Fund website that he'd personally funded and overseen an underwater excavation that had discovered portions of the massive F-1 rocket engines that were used by Apollo 11. The engines had been lit for approximately 150 seconds on July 16, 1969, in order to send Apollo 11's Saturn V launch vehicle to the moon. But after the launch went wildly wrong, they were located at around 14,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida. Bezos intended to retrieve one or more of the engines for exhibition, and in 2013 he declared that parts from 4 F-1 engines had been hauled back to the surface after spending more than 40 years at the bottom of the ocean. It was hard to pinpoint precisely which flights the engines originated from, even though the Bezos Expedition website stated that several of the original serial numbers are missing or partially lost, likely to make mission identification problematic. It's possible that they're in fact from the Apollo 11's SIC stage. Each significant component of an F-1 engine had some type of serial number on it in order to be tracked through the production process. Each one that was flown was hand-built and manually assembled. It would be easy to identify which Apollo missions the recovered components originated from if the serial numbers on them could be decoded. A video depicting portions of the recovery procedure is available on the Bezos Expedition page. The engines are far beyond the reach of human divers, at a depth of about 3 miles or 2,000 feet deeper than the Titanic's remains. So, the operation was carried out using remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, that were controlled from the surface. The engines are absolutely enormous, measuring 19 feet from nozzle to fuel inlets, and weighing around 20,000 pounds. Because of this, it took a lot of skill to lift so much mass from the ocean floor, especially when the components had been corroded by seawater and had grown fragile. Rory Golden, the team's leader, previously collaborated with Dr. Robert Ballard to locate the Titanic, lending a lot of experience in the underwater exploration and salvage of the F-1 engines. The team found enough components to build 2 of these engines completely from scratch to combat the consequences of air exposure after being submerged in the ocean for so long. The parts must be restored and stabilized, but Bezos vowed that the rebuilt engines will be a centerpiece of a large museum-quality display. They wanted the hardware to reveal the entire truth, including the details of the 5,000-mile-per-hour re-entry and eventual collision with the ocean surface. And so, they were eager to put the equipment on display in the hopes it would inspire an audience. Because they've been broken apart and degraded, the engines, or rather the pieces of them, were placed next to another massive engine that's not in operation and serves as a reminder of how they appeared before they were launched. The two reconstructed F1 engines, along with other NASA artifacts, are highlighted in Apollo, a new permanent display at the Museum of Flight that opened to the public on Saturday, May 20th, 2017. Do you think it's possible that there could be an advanced civilization living at the bottom of the ocean? Let us know your thoughts down below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.